Today we celebrate 11 years of Urban Abbey. We celebrate that more than 11 years ago we had our first preview service here in this space when it was still Soul Desires bookstore. And then a month later we started reconstructing the space and reimagining the space. A year before that, a team of folks from First United Methodist Church joined in thinking through and imagining. A friendly agnostic architect designed our space for us, even though hanging out here was probably not of interest, but the work and the values and the practices of this effort mattered to her. The year before that, I was put on the spot at a meeting with our new district superintendent who really liked what we had started here, something called Wesley Pub, which was church with beer for young adults and young professionals and folks. And it got popular enough or noticed enough that someone complained to the bishop. And so I was invited to her office. And I made a little PowerPoint of just what it looked like and how it wasn't really wild. And why we couldn't actually meet at a bar was because, that wouldn't work for the bar. And she said, "Can you just do it with coffee?" And I said, "Absolutely not." A few years later, we were talking about Wesley Pub in front of the person in charge of new church starts. They call them plants. They had sent the two guys that I was ordained with, who were age approximate to the training for new church start pastors, to be planters. They had not sent me. And I was sharing with them about Wesley Pub, and I think they were a bit desperate. And they said, "Aha, you've already sort of started a church. What do you think?" And we began a conversation, and I didn't really know anything about new church starts. And so I said, "Well, how about a coffee shop? A space where everybody can come all the time and be who they are. Where you don't have to wonder if you're dressed right. Where you can come at different times during the day and get what you need and take a deep breath, even if it's just tea and coffee or a latte. And there's a space that cares for you and offers hospitality." And in this planning and discernment, all the people who had gifts that I didn't have came along and invested this time and energy and care and wisdom. I didn't even drink coffee when we started, let alone know anything about historic building permits. I was fired from painting multiple times. And yet we kept growing, short, slow but sure, steady. And then in about 2014, our bishop visited. And he wasn't a real fan, which he said out loud, of women as new church start pastors, which is probably, there just aren't very many. When I went to meetings, people said, "Are you Craig's wife?" And I was like, "No, Craig's from Omaha. We rode together. We're in the Methodist Church. We've been ordaining women since the 50s, but thank you." I literally spoke at the last meeting. Thanks for paying attention. Rob. The bishop didn't think this would work out. He didn't think women could be new church start pastors. He thought this was a bad idea in general. He didn't think it would be big enough to sustain, that there wouldn't be enough people. How would we have enough people in this space? And at that same time, there was a book that came out, a children's book called Enormous Smallness. It was this celebration of poetry. And I got to hear from a pastor in St. Louis, and then later a pastor who had a new church start with campus ministry that focused on community organizing and relationship building and building capacity, whether someone wanted to come to church or not. This enormous smallness, this way of being present, this way of every little thing and every little cup and every little moment being sacred in a world that values big. that values big boxes, values big power, big stock market, big everything. Even the church would prefer a new church start in a gym, a cafetorium with 600 people at a time. And then it looked like the bishop might be right. This accountant I know very well did some projections, which he loves that I share, about how we would close. Like in 12 months or less, we would run out of money. And I felt like we hadn't even really gotten a chance to start. Like we had grown enough, but not enough to make this financially sustainable. And the structures that we were a part of, in as much as they were life-giving and supportive, they didn't allow the full time that I wanted to give into this work. And so we took this scary and strange and very hard step of separating and becoming independent. And my only hope was that we had enough money in our little nest egg to get through that first year, and that I could beg the most conservative bishop in the United Methodist Church to let us have a restart grant. Because I knew he had done that for a bunch of cute white guys who play guitar and have a piercing or a tattoo, but not both. It would be too much. Also, all of their branding is orange. If you look at any new church start, like orange, maybe blue. But that year, I didn't have to beg the bishop, because this community in its fledgling state started giving differently. Our giving doubled in that first year. It is unheard of. It doubled again the second year. People began investing time and energy even more. And we are in this space of harvest and fruitfulness because of those lean, uncertain times. There were some years that I didn't know if we should sign a new lease. And this was the prayer I leaned into over and over and over. I wasn't sure about anything, and maybe certainty is more elusive than any of us will ever acknowledge. But in that space of uncertainty, it was this spiritual gift to try and be like this tree planted by streams of water, and to see this space in wintertime and imagine it in spring and summer and fall. And the gift was we didn't have to do that alone. See, I am, by the church's standards, called a planter, a church planter, but I am terrible with plants. I have killed so many, and not on purpose. Sometimes from maybe over-loving or trying too hard. Like one time I had a plant, and the woman said, "This is very aggressive, you'll be fine." And it died, and then I put it outside and left for a week in the summer, and I came back, and it was better than ever. Every time we've had to be in a space, we've had the people who know something come along. Barb Bredauer did our laundry and our leases. Jim Morley stepped in wholeheartedly all the time, practically like a staff person, to do the work of getting our accounting up to snuff and into a good place. All along, we've had the people that we've needed, who are like those nourishing waters for what we're going through. I want to name in particular today our friend Bud Phillips, and give thanks for Bud and Marge. Bud joined us before we were an us. When I first had this seed of an idea, I made him a mixtape on a CD, and I said, this is This is sort of a sound I'm imagining. Can you think about it with me? Can you listen to it? And he listened and he loved it. And he shared about a worship service that had existed before at First Church and how it came to a close. And at that moment, I knew that Bud was unusually special in church life. Because when something that you are a part of changes or sunsets, or even just changes time, sometimes folks head out. That one little thing. Like, come to church and you will see the absence of grace a lot. But Bud stayed rooted and stayed present. Bud was always there in morning worship at First Church at 8:30 and 10:50, in choir practice and rehearsal and all of it. And then he came here with me and Mark Kurtz to lead the 5:30 service. He brought his bass. He bought the stands. He even did all of our electricity. Bud and Marge gave in every single way. And Marge gives still. And Bud gives to us still. Even though he is gone from this space, we feel his presence in and through this work of love that he sowed into us. When we were at his funeral, Pastor Marita at First Church shared this quote about bass. See, Bud was a beloved musician with perfect pitch who made other musicians better. There are countless stories of how Bud, in this humble, sweet, kind, generous way, made everyone around him better. Us too. And that's the work of the bass in the music. It just fills everything out. It makes everything sound so much better. It may not be the noted highlight of the song, but it's this essential and life-giving presence. I have prayed this psalm over and over and over, especially in seasons that seemed like winter. And when I look at it now, I see it a little bit differently because of Bud. See, originally I thought that this was about us just being planted and rooted and staying present, staying the course, soaking in this stream of God's love that was somehow around us. And even though I would have said it theologically at the time, I see it now differently. That Bud is not only a part of soaking it in, he was a part of the stream of life that we soaked in that made this space what it is today. He is with us and in us and through us, and so many others all along the way have picked up the torch, have offered their love, have shown up, especially when it was hard or uncertain. May we be like those trees, soaking in the nourishment. But may we drink it so deeply that we become a part of the stream too, this endless cycle of sharing and nurturing and giving life. May it be so. Amen.